Santa Claus is one of those movies all of us 90s and 2000s kids grew up with. It's cozy, funny, and super nostalgic. But the story of how this movie actually came together is way more complicated and more interesting than the final product actually lets on. Behind the scenes, this story didn't even start at Disney. It started with two Chicago comedians writing a spec script back in the late 80s with no studio backing them, no guarantee that this movie would ever even be made. It was just an idea that they thought was hilarious. What if an ordinary guy accidentally became Santa Claus? That simple question set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to one of the biggest holiday movies of all time and help launch Tim Allen into one of the defining household names of the next 2 decades. But the journey from that first script to the film we ended up getting was full of unexpected decisions and almost recasts and behind the scene pivots that you'd never guess were even part of the process. And to understand how wild this path really was, we have to start at the very beginning with the two guys that wrote it. So like I said, back in the 80s, two guys, Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick, sorry if I butchered those names, they were part of Chicago's comedy scene. Performing sets, writing sketches, carving out a space for themselves however they could. They weren't big names by any means, but they had a talent for finding humor in everyday situations and building ideas that made them laugh first. One of those ideas sparked a screenplay they decided to write entirely on their own. And the basic idea of that script was supposed to be a man being pulled into a responsibility that he never asked for. Even in its early form, the story that we all know at the end is pretty recognizable, and that ended up turning into the man becoming Santa Claus. The transformation begins, chaos follows, responsibility takes over, and then the guy becomes a totally new man at the end. So it floated around, shared, read, and appreciated by some studios, but nobody picked it up yet until 1992. And in 1992, the script reached Outlaw Productions, a company known for character-driven films with strong comedic angles. They saw something very promising in this film, something that they thought could be shaped into a commercial story with the right team in place. So this became the script's first real momentum into the right direction, and as Outlaw worked with the writers, refined certain beats of the story, and started thinking bigger with it, they eventually brought the project to Disney, and the studio responded with a lot of interest. But they did have some hesitations. Instead of placing the film directly under Disney's main banner, it was slotted into Hollywood Pictures, a division used for projects that didn't immediately fit the classic Disney mold. That decision wasn't a bad sign, it just simply meant that the movie's identity wasn't fully locked in yet. But Disney did see potential in this, at least enough potential to invest time and resources into it. But before they moved forward though, one element of the script needed some attention. When Disney reviewed the original story, one moment that stood out to them was in the opening scene. Scott Calvin mistakes Santa for an intruder, and the situation escalates really quickly in a way that Disney couldn't put in front of families.
And I shot Santa in the original script. I was crying, I was laughing so hard. You can't begin a Disney movie, Tim, with you murdering Santa Claus.
Please, no.
No, and I said, why not? You kill all the parents in all your other movies,
It was a dark comedy type of idea, and it was good in a more adult sense if you ask me, but Disney wasn't about to let this slide into one of their movies. And that scene was reworked into the moment we all know today, with Santa just slipping off of the roof instead. Outside of adjustments like this though, the film's foundation stayed largely intact. I mean, Scott Calvin's emotional arc was still at the center, and it was still pretty true to the original. The comedy was still rooted in disbelief and responsibility clashing head on. So it wasn't like Disney just rewrote the movie or anything like that. They just shaped it so it was more family friendly. So as soon as the tone felt right for them, the biggest question they had next was who's gonna play the role? And the early conversations focused on established A-list film stars, actors with long movie careers, strong box office histories, and distinct comedic styles. And the first person that they approached for the role was actually Bill Murray. He had already built a career on deadpan comedy and sarcastic charm, a perfect fit on paper, but he ultimately passed on the movie. According to some sources, they say he had a bad time filming the Scrooge movie and he didn't want to be a part of another Christmas flick. Don't quote me on that, I might be wrong, but that's just what I read online, so that's what I'm gonna go with here. The next name that was potentially in the running was actually Chevy Chase, and he was a guy that they thought could fit the role really well, but he also turned down the role apparently due to scheduling reasons. seasons. So the conversations widened from there, and Disney internally started considering actors like Robin Williams, Tom Hanks, Tom Selleck, and even Mel Gibson, all huge A-list actors at the time, each of whom would have pulled this film in a radically different direction. At least I feel like that. Even though the character is written in a certain way, the actor of the character always brings like a certain energy or vibe to that character. So it's hard to even imagine what this Scott Calvin would have been like if you put somebody like Bill Murray in the place of Tim Allen, or Chevy Chase in that role, or Tom Selleck, any of these guys, Tom Hanks. This movie would have felt completely differently, in my opinion, with these actors in place. But either way, those discussions slowly started to narrow the field, and in the background of all of this, there was something happening that just couldn't be ignored, and that was that home improvement was exploding. By 1993, Tim Allen wasn't just a TV star, he was one of the biggest personalities on American television. Home Improvement regularly dominated weekly ratings, sometimes beating out shows that were considered unbeatable. Millions of people tuned in specifically for this show and to see Tim Allen. Hollywood might have been slow to connect TV success with film potential, but audiences already loved his persona, the exasperated everyman, the guy who complains his way into responsibility, the heart underneath the sarcasm. Even if he wasn't the first name on the casting list, he was impossible to overlook. But still, Disney had to decide whether his sitcom success could actually translate to the big screen. And when Tim Allen's name officially entered the conversation, the room had to weigh the two truths of this situation. He was one of the most recognizable entertainers in the country, but he had never led a film before. And that combination creates a unique tension in Hollywood. You see, especially in the 90s, studios want recognizable stars, but they also want certainty. And film certainty only comes from film history. But while those discussions were happening, the movie itself was quietly branding toward the type of performance that Tim Allen excelled at. His comedic rhythm, sarcasm, and timing all lined up naturally with Scott Calvin's personality and journey. What he did every week on Home Improvement, playing a stubborn guy who messes up, grows, learns, and tries again, was the DNA of this movie. He wasn't a wild choice for it, he was just unlikely. He needed someone who knew how to translate his talent to the big screen, and that someone was about to set the stage for all of this. John Pasquin. Sorry if I butchered that name again. What's up with these names being hard to pronounce all over the place? John Pasquin was chosen to direct this movie, and the casting conversation changed instantly after this, because John Pasquin wasn't just a director with a solid resume, he was a key creative force behind the early years of none other than Home Improvement. And he had directed Tim Allen before through some of the show's biggest episodes and most emotional moments, shaped the tone of the sitcom, and built a working relationship founded on trust and precision. John knew exactly how to get the best performance out of Allen, and he knew how to guide him through scenes that balanced humor and sincerity. He knew what audience responded to. So when the question resurfaced, can Tim Allen carry a movie? John was the one person in the room who didn't have to guess. He already watched him do it week after week after week, and he did it in front of millions of people. That connection gave the studio confidence, and the confidence locked in Tim Allen as Scott Calvin. It was the right partnership landing at the right moment. And when the Santa Claus released in 1994, it was a smash hit. Families connected with this movie immediately, with kids embracing it, and adults were able to find the humor and heart irresistible. Year after year, it became part of the holiday rotation for a lot of people. But the real crazy part about all of this is what it did for Tim Allen's career. Home Improvement had already made him a television giant, but the Santa Claus proved that he could carry a film. It showed Hollywood that audiences would follow him beyond the sitcom stage and into the theaters. I mean, within a year of this, he became the voice of Buzz Lightyear, another role that defined an entire era of family entertainment, a movie that's still watched and loved today. More films followed that, and more success followed that, and suddenly Tim Allen's career wasn't split between TV and movies anymore, it was thriving in both. And it all traces back to this project, a spec script written by two comedians, shaped through development, guided by tone, and given life by a casting choice rooted in trust and creative history. So the next time you watch The Santa Claus, It's easy to lose yourself in the holiday warmth and nostalgia, but beneath the surface of this movie is a long chain of decisions, near misses, creative leaps, and one powerful connection that brought the right actor into the right story at the right time. A movie that shaped childhoods, a role that transformed a career, and a reminder of how the biggest successes sometimes come from the simplest ideas.